Right now, as you read these words, there is a voice in your head reading along with you. You can hear it, can't you? Your own voice, silent, private, narrating each word as your eyes move across it. And that voice never really stops. All day long, you talk to it, and it talks back. You rehearse arguments in the shower, delivering the perfect comeback to someone who isn't there. You scold yourself when you drop something. You coach yourself through a hard moment, whispering, "Come on, you can do this." You narrate your own life, plan your day, replay your embarrassments, all inside a constant, private conversation with someone who is, somehow, also you. And here's the thing, we almost never talk about this. Because to say it out loud, to admit, "I talk to myself," constantly, sounds just a little bit unhinged. But the secret is that every single person around you is doing the exact same thing, every waking minute of every day. An entire silent world of self-conversation hidden behind every calm face you see. So where did it come from, this voice? When did the first human being hear words spoken silently inside their own skull? And here's the question that should genuinely unsettle you, the one we'll spend this whole journey chasing. Is that voice actually you? Or is it someone else entirely that you carry around inside your head and have simply mistaken for yourself? Let's start with just how strange this really is, because we're so used to it that we've gone completely blind to it. When you talk to yourself, you are, in some sense, two people at once. There is the one who speaks and the one who listens. A part of you generates the words, and another part of you receives them, considers them, and answers back. But both of them are you. So who, exactly, is talking to whom? Psychologists call this inner speech, or the inner monologue, the silent verbal stream that runs through your waking mind. And it is so relentless, so constant, that you've stopped noticing it the same way you've stopped noticing the feeling of your tongue resting in your mouth, or the sound of your own breathing. It is the water you swim in. It feels like the very core of you, the most private thing you own, the place where the real you actually lives. Which is exactly why the truth about where it comes from is so deeply surprising. Because here is the first great revelation, and it flips everything you assume about that voice completely upside down. The voice in your head was not born inside you. It came from outside, and it moved in. To see this happening, all you have to do is watch a small child. A young child, maybe 3 or 4 years old, does not have a silent inner voice yet. Instead, they think out loud. Watch a little girl trying to solve a puzzle, and you'll hear her narrate the whole thing to herself, out loud, to no one. "No, that piece is too big. Try the small one. Turn it. There." She isn't talking to you, she's talking to herself, coaching herself through the task, exactly the way an adult would do it silently. Psychologists have a name for this: private speech, and every healthy child does it. It bubbles up soon after they learn to talk, this strange, out-loud conversation with themselves. And then something remarkable happens. Somewhere around the age of 5, 6, 7, that out-loud self-talk begins to go quiet. But it does not disappear. It goes underground. It sinks inward, gets faster, more compressed, and eventually becomes fully silent, turning into the private voice you now hear in your head. Read that again because it's astonishing. Your inner voice is not some deep, mysterious, inborn feature of your soul. It is your childhood habit of talking to yourself out loud, that simply learned, over years, how to whisper. The voice in your head is the ghost of a talkative little kid, still narrating their world, who just got quiet enough that no one else could hear. And this inner voice is not nearly as ghostly as it feels. When you speak silently inside your head, your brain lights up many of the very same regions it uses to speak out loud, including the areas that plan and produce real, spoken words. In fact, if you pay very close attention while thinking hard, you may notice the faintest flickers of movement in your throat, your tongue, your lips, tiny suppressed echoes of the words you believe you are only thinking. Inner speech, at its core, appears to be ordinary speech that has simply been turned inward and muffled, talking with the volume dialed all the way down to 0. The voice in your head is, quite literally, you speaking, in a whisper so quiet that only you can hear it. But this only pushes the mystery one crucial step deeper. Because if the inner voice is internalized self-talk, then where did that child get the words in the first place? Where did the whole idea of narrating yourself, questioning yourself, encouraging and scolding yourself come from? And the answer is the part that should give you chills. It came from other people. It came from everyone who ever spoke to you. Think about it. Before a child can talk to themselves, someone first talked to them. A mother says, "Be careful, it's hot." A father asks, "What do you think happens if you do that?" A teacher says, "Let's take it one step at a time." Over thousands of these exchanges, the child absorbs not just the words, but the entire structure of the conversation. And then, alone, they begin to run that same conversation by themselves, playing both parts. The questions other people asked you slowly became the questions you ask yourself. The voice in your head is built, quite literally, out of the voices of the people who raised you. And you can test this on yourself, right now. The next time you make a mistake and that inner voice snaps at you, "Oh, that was so stupid," stop and really listen to it. Whose voice is that, really? For a great many people, the harsh inner critic is not their own voice at all. It's the echo of a parent, a teacher, an old bully, a voice from decades ago that moved in, set up residence, and never left. You are, in a very real sense, still having a conversation you first had with someone else when you were 5 years old, except now you have taken over both sides of it forever. That casual thought you have about yourself might be a sentence your mother spoke to you in a kitchen 30 years ago, still playing on a loop, in a voice you've come to believe is your own. Now, before this starts to sound like a curse, understand this. That borrowed voice is arguably the single most powerful tool the human mind has ever developed. It is the engine of nearly everything that makes you capable. How do you plan for the future? You rehearse it in words, silently talking yourself through what you'll say and do. How do you control your impulses? You talk yourself down. No, don't send that message. Wait until morning. How do you solve a hard problem? You walk yourself through it, step by step, narrating the logic. How do you push through exhaustion or fear? You motivate yourself, out loud in your mind. Just one more. Keep going. This isn't a bug. It's the operating system of self-control. And the proof is beautifully simple. Studies show that when children are allowed to talk to themselves out loud while working on a puzzle, they solve it better and faster than when they're kept quiet. Talking to yourself, far from being a sign that something is wrong, is often the literal sound of a mind doing its finest work. And once you understand this voice, you can start to wield it far more deliberately, in ways scientists have actually measured. Here is a small but astonishing example. When people are stressed or frightened and talk to themselves using the word I, as in, "I can't do this, I'm going to fail," it tends to make the panic worse, pulling them deeper into it. But when they switch and talk to themselves the way another person would, using their own name or the word you, as in, "Come on, you've got this. You have handled worse than this before," something shifts. They grow calmer, they think more clearly, they perform measurably better. Just by changing a single pronoun in your inner voice, you can step outside of your own panic and coach yourself like a trusted friend standing at your shoulder. It is a tiny trick, and it reveals something enormous. The voice in your head is not just something that happens to you, it is an instrument, and you can learn to play it. So when, in our deep history, did this voice first switch on? Here we run straight into the great problem of studying the mind. Thoughts leave no fossils. A silent voice speaking inside a skull 200,000 years ago left absolutely nothing behind for archaeologists to unearth. But we can still reason our way toward it. Inner speech requires full, structured language, with grammar, with syntax, with the power to string words into ordered, deliberate thoughts. So the inner voice could only have been born once our ancestors possessed that kind of language, somewhere in the long, slow dawn of the modern human mind. And picture the moment it first truly mattered. The first time a hunter, instead of simply reacting on instinct, paused and silently ran through a plan in words before he moved, rehearsing the ambush inside his own head. That was a quiet revolution. A creature that could talk to itself could think before acting. It could rehearse the future, weigh a choice, and become the author of its own behavior instead of a prisoner of the moment. That silent voice may be the invisible engine behind the entire human conquest of the earth. And this voice does something even more profound than help you plan and focus. It builds the very sense that there is a single, continuous you at all. Think about it. Your life is really just a chaotic stream of disconnected moments, a flood of sensations with no natural thread holding them together. What ties yesterday's you to today's you to tomorrow's you into one single person? The narrating voice. It's constantly telling your story. I did that yesterday. I'm doing this now. I'll fix that tomorrow. I'm the kind of person who does this and not that. That endless inner narration is the thread that stitches 1,000 scattered moments into the seamless feeling of being one continuous self. You are, in a way that is almost dizzying to consider, a story that your inner voice never stops telling, which means that the self, the you that feels so solid and real, may be less like a thing and more like an ongoing conversation. But now we arrive at the strangest, most unsettling turn in this entire story. Because if the inner voice had to develop, if it was assembled from the outside in, then a wild question follows. Was there a time when humans did not have it? A psychologist named Julian Jaynes made one of the most audacious and controversial claims in the history of the field. He argued that as recently as 3,000 years ago, humans may not have experienced their inner voice as their own at all. In his theory, when an ancient human had a thought, a sudden impulse like, leave this place, or do not do that, they did not recognize it as their own thinking. Instead, they heard it. They experienced it as an actual voice, an external command, spoken by a god, a king, or a dead ancestor. Jaynes pointed to the oldest human writings, where characters are constantly being ordered around by gods, where no one ever seems to sit and privately deliberate the way we do. He suggested that these ancient people weren't introspecting at all. They were, in a sense, being told what to do by voices in their heads that they could not recognize as themselves. Now, I have to be an honest guide here. Most scientists think Jaynes pushed this idea much too far, and the specifics of his theory are fiercely disputed. But do not let that make you dismiss the far more disturbing point buried inside it, because that point survives, and it is this. The line between a thought I am thinking and a voice that is speaking to me is astonishingly, uncomfortably thin. We know this because it still breaks down today. In certain conditions and under extreme stress or in certain states of mind, people can and do experience their own inner speech as coming from outside them, as alien voices they cannot identify as their own. Your inner voice feels like unmistakably you. But that feeling of ownership is itself something your brain generates, and it is more fragile than you would ever want to believe. The God speaking in the ancient mind and the voice narrating in yours may be far closer cousins than we are comfortable admitting. And here is another fact that stuns almost everyone who hears it for the first time. Not everyone even has a voice in their head. For a long time, we simply assumed that a constant inner monologue was a universal feature of being human, that everyone experienced their thoughts as words the way you probably do. But it turns out that a significant number of people report having little or no inner speech at all. They think in pictures, in raw concepts, in feelings and spatial impressions, with no running verbal narration whatsoever. To them, the idea of a non-stop voice chattering away inside your skull sounds bizarre, even exhausting. And to those of us who have that voice, the idea of thinking without it feels almost impossible to imagine. Sit with what that means. If some people think perfectly well without any inner voice at all, then the voice is not the same thing as thought itself. It is just one tool, one particular method the mind can use, that some brains rely on constantly, and others barely use at all. So what about other animals? Does your dog have a voice in its head? Does a chimpanzee silently talk itself through its day? Almost certainly not, at least not in words, because this kind of inner speech requires full, complex language, and language like ours belongs to human beings alone. Make no mistake, animals have rich inner lives. They feel fear and joy, they hold images and memories, they have desires and dreams. But they do not have this, a silent voice made of words that can argue with itself, rehearse a conversation for next Tuesday, narrate a running story of the self, and coach its owner through a difficult choice. This wordy, endless, internal companion may be one of the deepest and most defining differences between the human mind and every other mind that has ever existed on this planet. You are, quite possibly, the only kind of creature that is never truly alone with itself, because you always have someone in there to talk to. And there is one more quiet gift this voice gave us. It meant that a human being could be physically, completely alone, and yet never entirely lonely. With a voice in your head, you always have company, a companion to reason with, to argue with, to comfort you, and keep you steady through the long, dark hours of the night. It is surely no accident that so much of human spirituality is, at its very heart, a conversation. Prayer is talking, silently, to a listener you trust is there. Whether that listener is imagined as a god, a lost loved one, or simply the deepest and wisest part of yourself, the act is the same ancient one. Using the inner voice to reach out from the solitude of your own skull and speak to someone who feels real. The very same voice that lets you talk to yourself is the voice that lets you feel you are never completely on your own. Which brings us to right now, to your world, and a modern twist our ancestors never faced. Your inner voice was originally built from the people physically around you, your family, your small circle. But today, that voice is being co-authored by something vastly larger. Every video you watch, every post you read, every voice you scroll past, seeps in and joins the inner chorus. You now carry an internal conversation with more contributors than any human in history, a mind furnished by thousands of strangers you've never met. And this matters enormously, especially when that inner voice turns cruel. That vicious self-criticism at 3 in the morning, the voice that calls you a failure, a fraud, unlovable, that voice is very often not you at all. It is an internalized echo, a recording of something that someone, somewhere, once said to you, or that you absorbed from a world that profits from your insecurity. But here, at last, is the quiet hope hidden in this whole story. Because the voice was learned, the voice can be retaught. You are not stuck with the narrator you were given. You can, slowly and deliberately, change the voice in your own head. So let's come back one final time to that voice reading these very words to you, right now, in this exact moment. It feels like the most intimate, most private, most undeniably you thing in the entire universe, the very center of who you are. But now you know its deepest secret. That voice was never born inside you. It was assembled, one word at a time, across your entire life, out of everyone who ever spoke to you. Your mother's warnings, your father's questions, a teacher's patience, a friend's laugh, a cruelty you never forgot, a kindness that saved you, all of them taken inside, woven together, and mistaken ever since for a single voice you call yourself. You are not one voice, you are a chorus. You are a lifetime of other people's words, still echoing, still speaking, long after those people are gone. The voice in your head is the living ghost of every conversation you have ever had. And maybe the most human thing about you is this, that you are never, ever truly alone in there. You carry all of them with you, everyone who ever shaped you, still talking, for as long as you live. You spent your whole life certain that this voice was you. But listen closely, and you'll hear the truth. It was really everyone who ever loved you, taught you, and hurt you. And they are all still speaking.